Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast with Alison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Alison.
How are you doing?
I just realized that my microphone was over on the side and I had to move it over. I am awesome.
Okay.
I'm doing well. And how are you?
We can hear you. Good. Yeah, I'm good. And I'm excited, as always, to talk to you, but even more excited than normal, if that's possible today, because of our subject matter. We are going to be talking about the huge, beautiful book that I have in front of me, called Nourishing Traditions, which I looked at the inside and noticed it was published in 1999 and thought, my gosh,
wow.
I was a lot younger then. And it stood the test of time. It really has.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I woke up this morning and I thought, so for people listening to the podcast, Alison and I have switched our recording time, at least for summer, and she's recording in the afternoon. I'm in the morning. So I woke up this morning. The first thing I thought was, it's the Nourishing Traditions Day.
Yay.
I'm so excited.
How exciting. So have you had breakfast or not yet?
Well, yes and no. I ate part of it. It's not done. But I just had to get some calories in me before we started so my brain could work.
Yeah.
And I just made a couple fried eggs and I put on some jalapenos that I pickled last summer and sauerkraut that we made last summer and sour cream. And then I peeled a blood orange, which those are in season basically in the spring. So I want to, we've been eating them pretty much every week. So enjoying that.
We've got those here as well.
I bet you have lots.
The boys that eat them a lot and they absolutely love them.
Well, they don't grow out here. Most of the citrus either comes from South America or Florida in the US, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Which is not to say there's not little pockets here and there elsewhere, but that's where a lot of it comes from. I just don't think we could sustain the warmth that a citrus plant would need out here.
So you're going to have some extra breakfast after we finished recording this?
Oh, and I made
breakfast number 2.
I should Hobbit breakfast. I should also say that I made coffee this morning, and I put in creamer, which every time I make this for anybody who comes over, they have to have more. And then I made some for Katie, who's, milking the cow. And she said, oh man, that was so good. You have to make some more of that. So what I do is I bring her a mason jar with all the ingredients for the creamer, except the cream in it, so that she can just put fresh cream in it that day. But it's just...
So you're going to tell us what's in there?
Yeah. It's just cream and maple syrup and vanilla, which is so simple. And
nice
and I'll use any weird combo. I'll use like some cream, some milk, or just whatever I have. Right now I have tons and tons of Jersey cream, so that's what I'm using. But it's so stupid simple and it's absolutely delicious. Of course, because there's maple syrup.
My hubby started putting ginger in his coffee. I got a book about it's called BB's Kitchen, and it's some different countries in Africa. And I read about the coffee that they make there with ginger. And so Rob started putting ginger in his coffee and he quite likes it.
There's a lot of countries in Africa that I've noticed really have a lot of really, really spicy hot things in their foods. And I suppose it's because, the warmer it is, the better you can grow those spicy things. But spicy ginger tea and things like that, I really associate in my mind with African cuisine. I know it's so diverse and broad, an entire continent with tons of countries. But in my mind, that's just where I always go.
And maybe I'll be able to share some more about that book as I dig into it a bit more, because I'm enjoying it. So I had lunch before we recorded.
And what did you have?
And I had some bread, some sourdough spelt bread, which is the recipe that's on my site, that's a go-to here. Spread with lard, which we blended ourselves, which is just gorgeous. And I had goat with it, because we got half a goat last week.
Goat.
And we've eaten all the innards, and so now we're on to the actual muscle meat. And I got the ribs out at the weekend and cooked them in the oven with kind of salt and pepper and olive oil and marjoram as a rub. And then we've been eating those since the weekend, kind of all the leftovers. So I had a great big bone, which I just sat and gnawed off, because there was loads of meat hidden in all the kind of corners and crevices.
Isn't that satisfying?
And I had...
the satisfying feeling, though,
yes.
chewing on a bone.
Very, very. And also the different textures, and kind of, you get some of the meat that's close to the bone, so it's gone a bit harder and more crispy, and then some of it that's softer. And it was really delicious.
Drinking a smoothie can't compete.
And I had... some salad with local leaves and carrots with lemon juice and olive oil, and some olives. And I sat outside in the sun and ate it.
All of it sounds perfect.
It's delicious.
And how warm is it there where you are right now?
Yes. Yeah, it's getting very, very warm. We're getting to the point, there's this point before summer really hits, where it's kind of comfortable, and then it shifts into the, oh my gosh, you can't go outside, it is ridiculously hot unless you go in deep shade. So at the moment it's glorious outside. It's lovely and warm. If you sit in the shade, you get that warmth without being burned, or without having that intense sun on you. And it's just the mornings are warming up in the house. Italian houses tend to be quite dark and thick walled, so they stay cool. But when I'm coming up in the morning, I notice that it's kind of not as cold, and I'm not having to put my slippers on. All the floors in Italy are terracotta or tiled, so they were usually very cold. But the temperature's changing, and my slippers aren't on all the time.
Oh, man. And does it get humid there?
Not particularly, no. Often it's too much the other way. Dry.
Too dry.
Especially, when it gets to July and August, it'll be very dry.
So
no, we don't suffer with the humidity too much.
Does the region ever suffer are droughts and agriculture kind of a problem there?
Not that I've heard of in Tuscany, but they could be happening and under my radar. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's a good question. I should go find that out. After we've talked about nourishing traditions.
Well, yeah, let's talk about this. I'm so excited about this.
So, one thing I want to say before we start is that we keep forgetting, and we don't keep forgetting, but we keep meaning to talk about the Patreon.
Oh, yeah, I'm so excited about this.
We've set up a Patreon account, which, if you don't know, is a kind of a way that you can say thank you and subscribe monthly to creators. And we've done this for the podcast. And so if you like what we're doing and you would like to support our work, help us pay for all of the equipment that we use, and also in kind of to say thank you, we are going to be dropping things into the Patreon feed, as they call it, which will come into your inbox, which is going to include a monthly exclusive podcast where we sit at a table and chat, and you can send your questions in. And also we're hoping some extra things. And the reason I mention it now is because one of the first extras that we have planned is linked to Nourishing Traditions, in that we decided, because we love this book so much, that we couldn't share everything in one episode, and that we wanted to go further in depth into two of our favourite recipes and talk about them and show them and make them and share them with you. So the Patreon subscribers will get a Zoom call, which is going to happen next Friday, the 30th of July. The timings are 7 o'clock in the morning Pacific summertime, which is 3:00 in the afternoon UK time and 4:00 in the afternoon Rome time. So hopefully from that, wherever you are, you can work out how it will be for you. And if you're a patron, you'll get that for free just in your feed, and you can come on live and talk to us and watch us and ask us questions, or you can watch it or listen to it later on. So I wanted to put that in before we start so I don't forget, because I know once I dive into this book, I'm going to get very excited. So Andrea, do you want to start by explaining what Nourishing Traditions is? Perhaps some people who are listening don't have the cookbook or have only just got the cookbook and don't know much about it.
Sure. And I will say, read the live Zoom. I am so excited for that. I'm just so excited. It's like my dream come true. So
it's going to be very, very cool.
I know. I can't wait. It's going to be really fun to cook on Zoom. I don't know. I just wanted to do something like that for so long, and to just demonstrate some of our favorite recipes and get to see the Patreon faces. So, okay. So Nourishing Traditions is a big, thick paperback book. Its subtitle is The Cookbook That Challenges Politically Correct Nutrition and the Diet Dictocrats. So I will just warn you right now, nothing about the book is subtle or apologetic. And if you're... Oh yeah, throw it outside. One of the kids just found a carpenter ant. If you have, firm views about food and you're offended by the views being challenged, it's probably not the book to read, because you'll just she doesn't apologize for the historical data that she presents, and so I want to touch on that. It's not Sally's opinions. Her own opinions and her, what she thought were challenged many times while she did her research, I know. And she draws from really the history of humanity and what has sustained humans and really sustained us the best for thousands of years. There are obviously many times in history that humans have been starving to death or hungry. And she talks about all of it. She talks about rabbit starvation and, being fat satisfied and things like that. She talks about when Western culture comes into a country and the way it destroys the health of the population and things like that. So when I'm saying that she's talking about all these things, you might be thinking, but you said it's a cookbook? What? This sounds like a history book. So Sally has recipes in here, of course. There's tons of recipes in this book. And then she has a thick margin on every page with basically what you would call the footnotes, except she put it in the page so you can read it right there. And so for the recipe that you're reading, maybe it's a recipe about oats, then in the margin she says, okay, so these are people who we're eating oats, and this is some historical data on how they prepared it, and this is why they did it this way. And then here's an anecdote about somebody who was eating it. It's so fascinating.
I have never seen a book like that before or since in my life.
Neither
when I first picked it up, I was just flabbergasted because I always want to know the history and the context around it. Right. And to see the recipes and then to see the depth of research
unbelievable
that is listed on the left and right of the pages. I just, apart from being in awe of the information that's in it, I'm just totally in awe of the research and the work that went into it. That one woman who has a family and a life, it could be such a tour de force to create something so unbelievably informative and groundbreaking and interesting.
And I mean, when I got the book, I sat down with a highlighter and a pen and a notebook, and I just read it. I mean, you can read this. I mean, I read every cookbook that I have, but you can read this with much enjoyment. And in a way, I was trying to think how to describe some of the things in the book. And in a way, some of the the recipes are all drawn from many different cultures. And so one recipe name may go by a variety of names. She may put the name in parentheses, or if you're familiar with it, you may have heard it called a different name somewhere else. But these recipes are all things that are so staple to each culture. For some people, it's like if you wrote down a recipe, how to pour cereal and milk, or how to butter your toast, or how to boil water for tea. And a lot of my friends who, I have friends who come from, cultures that have recipes in these books, and they say, wow, it's like, why would you even write that down? But these are things that we don't know. How to prepare uji or how to make fermented oatmeal. These are things we don't know. So they're all kind of, every recipe is kind of a paradigm or an idea that you can learn. And a lot of it is things that you would have just learned by seeing. Like, I have a really good friend who eats very Weston A. Price. And I remember when I had my baby and I was at her house, and I had my first baby at the same time, like a month apart from when she had her last baby. And I remember seeing her fry an egg, leaving the yolk runny, and then feeding the baby just the yolk. And I thought, wow, but that's in Sally's book, but that's something that I just learned by seeing, right? So there's a lot of things that we should learn by seeing growing up, but we don't. And so she's written it down in here. And so, yeah, it's kind of like many lifetimes wrapped up in the book.
When did you get the book, and what did it change for you when you got it?
Oh, I actually looked on my old blog to see when I had reviewed it. I think I got it in 2012. That was when I had, I emailed Sally and asked her if I could review this book and the baby book, and she sent me both of them. And so on my old blog, I can put the link. It's a terrible old blog. A lot of the recipes are really bad, so but I reviewed some really good books, and they shaped a lot of what, like, they totally changed the way I was eating, and Nourishing Traditions is one of them that completely changed the way I was eating. And I should also specify Nourishing Traditions not to be confused with Nourishing Kitchen, which a couple people have asked me if they're the same thing, and they are not. Nourishing Kitchen is another wonderful blog and wonderful cookbook that I have, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, this is the one by Sally Fallon.
Nourished Kitchen is the title of the other blog book.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so
what did it change for you when you got it?
Where do I begin? Well, I wasn't familiar with soaking grains, so we'll just say as a simple thing. I think what it changed for me was, I don't know if this happened to you too, Alison, but can we just say that in my desperation to lose weight and look like, whatever is the ideal at the moment, I tried everything. And that's not healthy. The starving. We're probably going to have a podcast sometime, Alison, to talk about our disordered eating histories. But, I tried starving myself. I tried like cutting out this, cutting out that, doing huge long bouts of intermittent fasting, which really for me was just excuses to starve myself. And just not healthy in terms of my relationship with food. And what Nourishing Traditions awakened, not sure how to say it, was what it awakened for me was just like a hunger to feel nourished, and to, when I read the traditions in the book, I thought, I want to be that. I want to have that rising on my counter, or in, jars on my counter. And it was just sort of this atmosphere where food was this, friendly, like body fuel, in such a good way, as opposed to like this daily battle and a struggle and something to be avoided and reviled, and like the enemy. it made food seem different than that, which in our culture, it's always like, can you resist that? Does this make you guilty? Is this sinful? So I would say in principle, that's what it changed for me. And of course, just the food traditions in there, from soaking to fermenting, and have just now obviously permeated most of my life.
I kind of forget that I didn't used to do all these things,
right?
Because I've been doing them so long. Same. And they're so part of my life now. But it's weird because I think I tried to figure out when I got the book, and I think it was either late 2011 or early 2012.
Whoa.
So it's kind of a similar time.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is strange, isn't it? And I came from a kind of a different perspective, in that at that point I was raw vegan. And so was Rob. And we'd both been eating raw vegan for 2 years.
Wow.
And I learnt a lot from being raw vegan. I really did learn a lot. At that point, I hadn't had a menstrual cycle for 5 years.
Wow.
And I was aware that I was getting older, and aware of a kind of a desire to have the freedom to be able to have a baby if I wanted. And so I started researching fertility foods and traditional fertility foods. And that kind of led me towards the Western price kind of path. And I had a friend who had the book and said, "Oh, have you seen this book?" And I was like, "No." And I ordered a copy, and I just had never seen anything like it in my life. And because I'm a cook, and I'm such a passionate creative cook, I just completely fell in love with the book. And I fell in love with it as a creative work of art, and as well as all the food. And so I remember we started doing the fermenting from it first. So I was able to access raw milk locally, and I started making some kefir, and we started making sauerkraut. And then as I transitioned off raw vegan, which was a challenge. There was a challenge kind of from the ethical point of view and my views then. Right. There was also a challenge from the fact that because I was so overweight when I was younger, double the size I am now, in fact probably a bit more, I found it really difficult to go back to fat. And I remember, reading about saturated fats, and that's what I'd cut out of my diet to lose the weight originally. And so when someone was suggesting to me to start eating fat again, I was just like, but no, I can't go back to that traumatic, horrible place when I was, a teenager and overweight. And so it was a bit of a roller coaster, but I took it on my path with me, and I slowly started including eggs, and then I was able to include some cheese. And after a few meltdowns of actually eating cheese because it had so much fat in it.
Wow. And
then I started including grains, cooked grains, because of course raw vegan, I wasn't eating any grains. And we did the sourdough. I learnt ferments from it. I learnt milk souring. I learnt the grain processing. I learnt the stock. And I just, I flew basically from it from that point onwards. And then, the end of the story is that I got my cycle back after investigating and changing. And
incredible.
Some other slight paths that Western Price took me off on, measuring my body temperatures and understanding about fat. And, and I got pregnant with Gabriel, which was great. But it was the kind of the beginning of that process, and then the opening up of that process. And, the book's been with me ever since, really.
There's so much wrapped up in what you just said, Alison, in your story, because I think we need to just go ahead and schedule a podcast to talk about this, because it's not just a question of, for a lot of people who are coming out of the starvation culture, or like you were saying, avoiding fats or not eating grains and stuff, it's a huge mental game. Like the shift you have to make to be thinking, okay, but I fat is so evil and I can't eat fat. And
it was.
And then you also referring to the well, is it even ethical for me to eat this when I've been feeling for so long that it would be unethical for me to eat animal product. And it's so funny to hear you, to think of if Alison, the raw vegan, could have seen Alison sitting on the porch chewing on a bone today, what would she have thought, Such a huge leap.
I don't know what she would have thought back then, but I know if she looked at me now, she'd see someone who was a lot happier and more content and more in touch with a lot more things than I was in touch with then.
Yes.
And part of that comes with just being, 10 years older, but a lot of it comes with taking a journey and embracing it and stepping forward into the unknown, even though it's scary, and changing. And that's what Nourishing Traditions helped me to do, really.
Right. And at the end of the day, if somebody wants to eat raw vegan, I have no problem with that. I mean, I don't care I don't care if somebody wants to live on oatmeal for the rest of their life. You do what you want to do, but I agree with you that what I have found for me, and I feel like I've tried everything. I did paleo. I lived off of Whole30. I tried vegetarian. I tried, serious, just standard American diet plus starvation and making myself throw up all the time. And there are some things where I felt good initially, but then, as you're saying, the sustained, was I having, I had really hard menstrual cycles for a long time. And I really have to say, when I look back in time, and I've always said it's from about when Jacob was born. And now when I think about it, that's when I started eating the Nourishing Traditions way. Not that I was 100% eating Nourishing Traditions, but, working into it, I have fantastic cycles now. I mean, I don't even know when I'm having them anymore. Other than the visual reminder. And that's not the way it used to be. So, looking at your outputs, I suppose your objective, you said you were measuring your temperature and things like that. Seeing how those signs of health stand up, to the scrutiny is enormously informative about the whatever diet you've chosen. So
I mean, completely. At the end of eating raw vegan, I was having problems with energy, that I didn't feel like I could power my legs.
Wow.
And I think at the beginning I did a lot of detox, because I'd had 20 odd years of abusing my body, and all those years of being overweight, the pressure that was on my body. But then it got to a point where I didn't have enough energy to carry on with my life. And I've always thought that, we have systems in us to detox, but we can't manufacture stuff.
Right.
We can't manufacture nutrients out of nothing, but we have detoxification systems in our bodies that work. And okay, we can overstress them, and the majority of the world do. But if you eat in this way, then you have the capability in your body to detox what needs to be detoxed. And, doing that period of raw vegan did some interesting and some good things for me at the beginning. But then there was a time where I knew I needed to switch, and that's where Nourishing Traditions led me. And what's really interesting is that from that point onwards, literally, I remember sitting across the table from Rob in our second flat when we moved to Italy the first time, and almost having a meltdown trying to eat a piece of cheese, because I was the psychological damage of being overweight for my childhood was just, tremendously weighing on me. And since that moment, I literally have had no problems with my weight at all. My cycle returned, and now I eat. I eat tons of things. I eat grains, I eat fat, I eat everything that I would love to eat. And I've never had a problem with weight since then at all. I don't own any scales. I've not had to think about my weight. And I spent so long, even after I lost the weight originally, age 20, worrying about, I'm putting a bit on, I've got to cut back on this, got to cut back on that, got to cut back on this. And obviously I've changed. I mean, I don't eat sugar. I don't really eat many sweet things at all, which I did initially after I lost the weight. But my whole diet's shifted to this place where it's, the soaking of the grains, the meat, the fat, it all comes together to satiate me, but also to just provide for my body and give me a stable weight, so I don't even have to think about it, which has been, I didn't expect it. When I turned to it, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to put on all this weight, and it just, that's not the case at all.
Well, it's kind of the standard of, if you really think about it, there's all these different diets: keto, carb restriction, paleo, carnivore. There's just so many different ones right now. And the standard of if a diet is healthy really is, does it make you skinny? Are you skinny?
Yeah.
And that's not even, that's like, ideal body fat, which is better to look at than are you skinny, because skinny can be enormously unhealthy. That's just one measure of if your body's healthy. There's so many other things to look at, and you've mentioned some of them. Do you have energy? Are you having meltdowns trying to eat food? Is your brain starved of what it needs to operate? Can you think? Do you have brain fog? Is your temps up, or are you always running low and cold? And there's just so much to look at. So, and I think that the Nourishing Traditions has just been really healing for my personal relationship with food. And
healing. Yeah. That's a great word, because she doesn't say that in the title or in the sub thing, but it's a healing book. Yeah. If you take it to heart, it's a healing book.
And probably anybody who lived through the 90s has to face some of the bias against fat, and just the, I don't know, I guess if you lived through the 2000s, the bias against grains. Yeah, Sally's book's pretty offensive, because she uses words like tallow and lard. So Sally she does provide lots of historical and anecdotal and scientific data. She has tons of footnotes and things to support the ancestral diet theories. She doesn't prescribe diets like in the terms of here's what you should eat every day. She just says, hey, you know what? People throughout history have pretty much always had something fermented at every meal, or, and so then you can draw your own conclusions. She's not going to tell you to eat tons and tons of raw leafy greens. She's not going to tell you to run screaming from fats or never eat grains. And this is probably the thing that shocked me the most when I opened the book, was she had things like Rapadura, which is like a brand name for sugar that still has some of the minerals and things in it, also called sucanut. I was so shocked to see that in there. I was like, what? This is anathema. How can she have sugar in a book that's supposed to be healthy? But she provides her her sources, and not everybody, like you can't even eat that. And like you've said before, you think that possibly you just did so much damage to your body eating too much of that for so long. And there are people who won't be able to eat some of the things in the book because it's just something you're allergic to. And maybe, as you also said, down the road healing will eventually happen, but you just need to put the book up to where you are in your healing journey and take your time with it. And if you're only comfortable with making a few things out of it at a time, just start with that and work your way through. So let's go a little bit.
Tell us what's in it.
Let's go over a little bit of the content of the book. So she starts out with an introduction that basically has workshops in it. I don't know what else to call it. Essays, workshops, passionate appeals. So she covers allergies, politically correct nutrition. And you might be thinking, what do you mean politically correct nutrition? Well, just remember that a lot of nutrition and dietetic guidelines come from the government.
Oh, yes.
And then just draw your own conclusions from there. She talks about ingredients and quality of ingredients, because I will say lard from a pasture-raised pig that lived out on grass under the sun is totally different than lard from a pig that lived in, a covered barn with a billion other pigs and just ate soy, right? Two different products. So she does talk about the quality. Then she has a section called basics. So she covers basics are things that we should already know. It's things that we should have grown up doing or seeing done all the time, that it's like
fermentation.
Yeah, I shouldn't even need to say this, but here it is. Yeah, dairy, how to do some basic ferments with dairy, the fermenting some veggies and fruits, sprouting grains, nuts, and seeds, doing the stock, sauces, salad dressings, and marinades. Then she has recipes, and these are just divided by your standard chapters. So let me flip back to the table of contents and I can tell you exactly what a couple of them are. She has so beginnings, like hors d'oeuvres. She has main courses divided by the meat type, so fish, organ meats, beef. There's vegetables, and then luncheon and supper foods, grains and legumes, snacks and finger foods, and desserts. And my favorite is the beverages chapter. She has tons of ideas for starting your own mixologies in there. Just every recipe in there, like I said before, every recipe in this book is basically an idea. And you'll probably say the same, Alison. Very rarely have I stuck to exactly how a recipe is in this book.
Oh, yeah.
Very rarely.
Completely. I was looking at some of the recipes before we recorded and thinking that, I do that recipe. And then I went back and looked at the recipe and realised, I've changed that several hundred times since I started it. And now it kind of doesn't really look like it was supposed to.
I know. I did the same thing. I thought, I made that. And then I looked at it and I thought, that's not how I do it at all anymore. But she gives you the principle. You understand the history and the science. And then you just spin off with what you have around you, what's local. And because the book is an education, not a prescription, then you're able to do that. You have the freedom to do that. Then
I'm just flicking through the beverages section now. You've got me excited.
The beverage section is kind of addicting. And if you ever looked in your fridge and thought, what do I do with all this whey? Go to the beverage section and you'll be like, I don't have enough whey. Then she also has baby and medicinal tips, and there is an entire baby book. And then she has an appendices with some resources ideas, kitchen management ideas, and a really good index that you can pull, you can find whatever you need through there.
Wow.
There's so much in there, and I thought to myself, I've made tons of the recipes out of this book. And so I actually went through and made a list of all the recipes I've made, and I thought, that's not as many as I thought. But it feels like a lot because, like you say, you've made it one time and then you've made 100 versions of it. So you feel like you've done a bunch.
So tell us some of your favourite recipes then that you've made a lot out of it.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, everything in the dairy section has been so helpful.
Okay.
We've used that all. It really gives you a great foundation for how do I say all the things at once? Only one sentence at a time. If you want to eat ancestral and you're thinking, okay, what are the books? I need a book on dairy. I need a book on grains. I really would suggest just get this book, because I have since now gotten other books on dairy where I've tried other more exploratory cheeses and things like that. But everything came from the foundation that I got out of this one book.
Yeah.
I'm like, such a budget thing to do, get one book instead of 30. And it's not the way a lot of these modern cookbooks are with, your biscuits have 42 pages of instructions with glossy photos showing you step by step. I mean, it's really a lot simpler than that. but so good. So in the dairy section, there's a cultured milk smoothie. That is my absolute favorite smoothie in the world. And I am so glad that I found this book right after I had Jacob, because I probably drank that every day for a year postpartum. And thinking about it now, I'm like, wow, that was probably really good for me. Because it has a lot of things in it that I had actually, God forgive me, starved myself from even during pregnancy. Very unhealthy, trying to stay under a certain weight, really paranoid about, gaining too much weight during pregnancy, horrible, just absorbing the culture, and abusing my body in that sense. But then stumbling onto this and just finding it irresistible. So I will say the ingredients in here real quick, which is buttermilk or kefir or yogurt, so any fermented milk, banana or berries, coconut oil, egg yolks, maple syrup or stevia, vanilla and nutmeg. And that
sounds lovely.
That is such a good, and it's not like a big ice. It's actually kind of almost a little bit warm when I make it, because I usually have to heat the coconut oil. But
yeah,
so
of course.
good.
Yeah.
And right underneath it is the raw milk warmer. Oh my word. It's so good. It's ridiculously good. Did you, I have lots of other favorites, but do you have any favorites out of the book that you want to tell us, Alison?
Yeah. I went back through it and put kind of post-it notes in all the recipes that I've made, and I don't know if you can hear the noise of all the post-it notes. Look. So the ginger carrots in the ferments are my favourite fermenting recipe.
Those are so good.
The cream cheese, I really like the cream cheese, and that's where I kind of, like you said, I learnt my dairy fermentation from there initially. Right. The beet kvass I've made a ton of times, and I really love beet kvass, and that I originally made, I remember, a long time ago from this book. There's a recipe for a spice bread made with rye on page 491, which that's the thing I'm going to be making on the Zoom next week, because I started making that probably about 3 years ago when I started making sourdough, and that's the one I went back to. I was like, I don't even make it like that anymore.
I've never made it
because I've made it so many times and I've made it my own. Well, there you go. I'll be cooking it in the Zoom next week, so
perfect.
You'll be seeing so intimately how it works. That's a fabulous thing. Also, there's a recipe for kasha, which I wrote down is on page 464, and kasha's with buckwheat, which is an overlooked grain by many people, and it's a fabulous recipe with eggs in it and stock. It's really easy, and it's so good.
Now I'm really glad you said that, because that was one when I went through, and I do this periodically. I'll go through and mark a bunch of recipes that I want to make, and then I write them down on a paper so I can make them. Kasha. And I wrote that one, so I'm really glad you said that you love that one.
It's really good. That's one of the recipes that I think, if you haven't gone into Nourishing Traditions, or you want something to start with, do the kasha, because literally you've got to have some stock, you've got to have some buckwheat, and then it's nice with eggs in as well. So if you've got stock and eggs and you go out and buy a packet of buckwheat, you can make it. And it goes so well. You can throw leftover chicken in it. Ooh. You can put cheese on it. You can serve it on the side with some other form of meat or offal. You can have it cold. It's a wonderful, wonderful dish. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about is the dosas. I think they're called dosas, and they might be called Indian-style pancakes, perhaps. But they're fermented lentils and rice that are fermented for, well, I think I do it for 4 or 5 days, because I'm an extreme fermenter. And then if you cook them in ghee on cast iron, you use a lot of fat, and they are absolutely gorgeous. And I have cooked them for guests for many times, and had kind of dips, yogurt dip to go with it, and other dips that I've made with coriander. And they are absolutely wonderful.
I will have
They're
to
a bit
make
more
them.
Complicated than the kasha.
I haven't made those either.
That's kind of an intermediate recipe. They're very, very good. Just shows you there's so many recipes in there that you could get like 20 ancestral cooks together and they'd be telling each other recipes that, I didn't know about that, because there's just hundreds of recipes in there.
So true. There's a lot of really basic things in there too that, mayonnaise, mustard, salsa, that once you kind of got the idea of it, then you make just bazillions of variations based on what you have on hand. And those have all, I thought, oh, of course I've made the mayonnaise. And then I saw again, mine has changed so many times, but those are really good staples to go with everything else. Those dosas sound amazing. And the kasha, just reading about it, sounded like an ultimate comfort food. So I wanted to make it. So
yeah, it is really a comfort food.
Their gingerbread. She has gingerbread on page 547.
Oh, I haven't done that.
It's ridiculously good. I don't know if you can do that one because it's sweet. I
can give it to the boys.
Yeah, not horrifically sweet. I made a note when I made it to make sure that you don't over bake it. It gets dry very quickly. So if you almost under bake it by just a few minutes, and then it's this perfect, dense, moist, and it has the shredded ginger in it. So you feel like there's just these bursts of ginger as you go through it. Oh, it's so good.
That's nice.
It's really good. And it's a really good,
nice. I made
simple, I was just going to say, it's a really good introduction to soaking grains. Because again, once you've made it, you know how to soak grains for and you can just take any recipe and do the same thing.
I was going to say about the offal chapter. The offal chapter's not got all the offal in it, but it's the one that I turned to. For instance, I got some brains a couple of months ago and I didn't know what to do. And of course I got this book down, and there's a big section on preparation of brains. There's a big section on liver, and there's some recipes for kidney as well. Yeah. So that I like, because we're serious offal fans here, and there's some really good recipes in there for offal. The other one that I wanted to talk about is on page, I just found it, on page 459. There's an African millet porridge, which I think you mentioned earlier on.
I did.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Uji.
How did you pronounce it?
Well,
Uji.
that's how it was
Uji,
pronounced to me by friends who said, "Oh, you have a baby? Well, we have to make some uji." And I was like, "Wait a minute! I think I just read about that in my book."
Okay. I remember when I got this book and I was flicking through it, and the first sentence in the instructions for that recipe is, "This is a recipe for the brave, the adventurous and the curious." And I thought, I have to make this. This is my recipe. And that's a really good one as well.
Yeah. I really can't say that, because I wrote down all the ones I had made, and looking back over it, I really can't say that there's any I didn't like.
Yeah, no, I think I probably agree.
And I think also a part of that comes down to, if you're using real ingredients, really good ones, it's really hard to screw it up.
Yeah.
Even if you make mayonnaise and it flops, it breaks or something, then you have a really nice salad dressing and it tastes really good.
Yeah.
So there's a few quotes that I wanted to read from her book to give everybody a feel for
please.
what. And I know you said, when I said, Alison, I want to read some of the footnotes, you said, how? I don't even know where to begin.
Where'd you start?
So I could have just let the book fall open anywhere and read it. But I thought there were a few that might give a really good sampling of what the book offers in the sidebar. So in the cultured dairy section, here's a little extract about whey. And I know you and I both, Alison, you told me you did, and I thought that was so funny because it's the exact same thing I did. As soon as I started reading this book, I started writing down all these books from the footnotes, and I thought, oh, I have to find this book. Good luck. $500 for a copy of this,
all out of print.
Oh, and it's all in French, There's not even an English translation.
Yeah, if there was one in Italian, I might stand a chance of reading it, but not in French.
So some of the books are hard to find, but some I do still look for. But anyways, so she says here in the sidebar, this is an excerpt from Hannah Kroger's Ageless Remedies from Mother's Kitchen. How good does that book sound? Don't you just want to read it? She says, whey is such a good helper in your kitchen. It has a lot of minerals. 1 tablespoon of whey in a little water will help digestion. What? What? It is a remedy that will keep your muscles young. It will keep your joints movable and ligaments elastic. When age wants to bend your back, take whey. With stomach ailments, take 1 tablespoon whey 3 times daily. This will feed the stomach glands and they will work well again. Wow.
I want that book. Like, seriously, I'm going back to check that it's not still £500.
Can you tell me what you find? Because I want that one too. And that makes me think, okay, yesterday was Memorial Day here in the States. And so Gary went, and Memorial Day is a day of observance where we remember and, we go and tend to the graves of our military dead. And my husband always participates in what's called the Murph, which is this CrossFit workout. I don't really remember exactly what it is, but it's like 100 pull-ups and 300 squats and, I don't know, run 2 miles and tons of push-ups. All the CrossFitters are listening like, you got that wrong. But anyways, it's really big. So he was saying this morning how his lats were sore. And so I'm thinking now I should go give him some shots of whey.
Give him some whey, yeah. Completely.
Okay, here's another sample from the sidebar. She has here and there little menus. So if I love the little menus because they're so inspiring to me. And this is one that I love because it sounds like exactly what I love to eat. So she has a peasant lunch, sourdough bread with cultured butter, raw cheddar cheese, pickled herring, pickled garlic, pickled cucumbers, and kvass. And that sounds like the perfect lunch to me. And on, I should be saying the page numbers. That was on page 97. But I'm jumping to page 448 because there's a passage here that goes with that peasant lunch that I just read in my mind. So she says, it seems that this is an excerpt from a book that I tried to find, but is only in French and is extremely expensive, by Claude Albert. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but
I remember looking for that one.
yeah. I think it's funny that we were each looking for the same books. Les aliments fermentés traditionnels. I don't know how to read it. Anyways, so it says, it seems that our contemporaries have little time to prepare nice meals. Frozen foods, canned foods, fast foods have invaded our supermarkets and our restaurants. We misunderstand our ancestors when we think that they could spend hours and hours preparing their meals. The old cookbooks may give this impression, but these books were for the upper classes that could afford to hire cooks.
Yeah.
Among the peasants, the women worked in the fields, and there remained little time in the evenings to prepare dinner. At noon, the men often ate in the fields. For lunch, they needed foods that were easily prepared. They needed fast food. And for dinner, they ate one-course meals, invariably something simple. Many fermented foods can be eaten without any preparation. Bread, cheese, sausage, lacto-fermented vegetables, olives, anchovies, fish and soy sauces, and many others. After all, we didn't have to wait for the Americans to invent the cheese sandwich, a fermented fast food that is delicious as well as nutritious as long as the bread and the cheese are of good quality. Increasingly rare these days because the fermentation process has been industrialized and therefore denatured. The Russians also invented fast food long before the Americans. When Turgenev's hunter arrives without warning at the peasant's cottage, he is invariably offered rye bread, cheese, pickled cucumbers, and kvass, 3 fermented foods and 1 fermented drink, always ready to be served to the passing guest.
That's amazing. It just makes you think about the kind of cheese sandwich and a drink.
Right.
The difference between a kind of fluffy white bread sandwich with, elastic cheese in and a cola compared to sourdough bread with raw cheese and butter, a bit of sauerkraut in it, and some kvass or some other kind of fermented drink. It just they are to say they're not the same food is just it's an
insufficient
to say the
of an
least.
epithet.
Yeah.
Well, we all know.
Yes, exactly.
We all know how Alison feels about fluffy bread and elastic cheese.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of her footnotes. There's so many other ones, and there was one really good one that just felt so enriching that I had to read it because I don't know if this ever happens to you, Alison. I'm sure it doesn't, because to my mind, you're the perfect human. But sometimes I'm just like, sometimes I just think, I'm just so tired of, doing this boring thing. What am I even doing? And so hearing something like this just revives my joy and reminds me of what I'm doing, because maybe it's because, when I'm around people like you, I never feel disgruntled about the things that I have to do at home. But sometimes I feel like the culture can just get into my brain, which is just, oh, what's the point? And, oh, this is boring. And, oh, I hate my life at home, So I never feel that way. But when that's all what you hear all around you, it starts to just trickle over a little bit. So this just uplifted me so much. And this is on page 401. And I'm actually in the section about vegetables. She said, this is a quote from Kohan? I'm not sure how to say it. If a woman could see the sparks of light going forth from her fingertips when she is cooking, and the substance of light that goes into the food she handles, she would be amazed to see how much of herself she charges into the meals that she prepares for her family and friends.
Wow. That is beautiful. I just turned to page 401 just as you started reading, and that sparks of light going forth from her fingertips when she is cooking. That's magic.
I just love, I think that we could talk about, vitamins and minerals and all that's important and has a place, but things like this is really what just lights me up for why I do what I do.
Yeah, it's feeding the soul, not just feeding the body, Oh, wow.
And to think that in this book there's 600 pages with those footnotes, every single one as good as the last.
Yeah, the depth of work that went into this, it's a masterpiece. It really is.
It is.
And there's still some recipes in it that I want to cook that I haven't done. I was flicking through and there's a miso porridge that involves cooking the porridge first and then putting miso in it afterwards and leaving it out to ferment when it's cooked, which I've wanted to do for a while and I haven't.
It's really funny that you said that, because when I saw the miso porridge, I thought, of course, I'm sure Alison has made that, because I know she loves miso.
No, I haven't. One day I'll make my own miso and I'll do it myself with my own miso.
Can't wait.
And there's also an oxtail barley soup in there. And I use barley a fair bit in slow cooker soups, kind of in the winter. But I've never cooked oxtail. And I read that and I thought, when it gets a bit colder again, maybe I'll get some oxtail and try that recipe.
Yeah,
Is there anything that's kind of on your big list of what you want to do?
Oh dear. Well, what I do with my cookbooks, and I've collected tons of cookbooks. I love cookbooks, and I'll sit down with a book and I'll work my way through it, and then I'll mark a bunch. I'll either use the sticky notes like you say, or I'll use a piece of paper to write down just ones I want to try, and then I kind of just work my way through the list as I have the ingredients. I see. So I do that for this one, and I've done it so many times, but I also always keep coming back to so many staples in the book, basic beans, refried beans, pancakes, mayonnaise, butter, pancakes. You'll end up making the same recipe so many times, but I really want to try her macaroons. That sounds amazing.
Okay.
I've not made many of her desserts, so there's a lot that I want to try, but you can only try so many desserts in such a span of time.
Yeah.
So I had made her spice cake a couple days ago. Oh my word, it was delicious.
Was that good?
I didn't make the topping that she has. We just had it without any topping, but it was so good. I would like to try her sauerkraut and bean soup. The lamb and cracked wheat appetizer looked really good.
Okay. I
don't know if you've done that one, but a friend of mine just butchered some lambs for us. I just got to go pick him up. But it has lamb, like ground lamb and bulgur and onion and spices and things like that. And it just sounds amazing. And they serve it with pita. I don't know. It just sounds delicious. And
So what recipe are you going to be cooking up on the Zoom class next week? Have you decided yet?
I have vacillated back and forth so many times. As soon as
Exciting.
As soon as I think I decided, then I don't know. Maybe I'll do this lamb and cracked wheat appetizer if I get to. I know we're making favorites, so that might seem strange, but if I have a chance to make it a few times between now and then, I might do that one, because I was trying to think of something that would go with what you were making, and I feel like this would pair really well. Alternately,
okay, well, I'm excited to see what you come up with.
I might also get the things out to demonstrate how to do the fermented oatmeal, because I would say that's what I get more questions about than anything, which is I know you talked about fermented oatmeal, how do you do that? And it just takes...
I get a lot of questions about fermented oatmeal as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's 30 seconds to make it, so why not just demonstrate it really fast and just have it out of the way? That might be a good one to show as well. Nice. But not really like worth doing an entire demonstration on. So I don't know, or maybe I'll do a dessert. It's really hard to choose. Exciting. I know. I need to.
We're going to have to do more than one, and then right. We won't have to choose.
That makes me feel better if we do more than one.
So we're coming up to an hour.
Oh boy!
What is there anything else you want to talk about regarding the book? Obviously there is, but
well, I would say,
how on earth do we finish talking about the book?
I would say with the book, the recipes in her book tend to work well in a routine, because a lot of things you say, I want to make gingerbread tonight. You open it up and she says, soak this for 24 hours. Yeah. And you think, oh, wait, what? So a lot of her recipes work well if you can get into rhythm. Some of them can be just made point blank, on the spot, but some of them require time, or if you've already got the mayo in your fridge that you've already made and fermented, then you can very easily whip up, her chicken salad recipe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it helps to get into a rhythm. And once you've, incorporated having homemade mayonnaise in your everyday life, then you incorporate the next thing, and some
I think it could be quite overwhelming if you get the book at the beginning and you don't know how to do any of it, or you're not sure. So I would say, it's a book for a lifetime. And if you've got it, then, and you're, living your life and getting on with and not having enough time to spend 24 hours a day in the kitchen, then just pick 2 or 3 things and make that your project for the next month. And then slowly those things will accrue. And like you said, then you'll might have mayonnaise in your fridge ready to make something else. It's a book I can imagine could easily overwhelm people, and just know that it's been on my shelf for 10 years, and it will be on my shelf hopefully for another 10, 20, 30 years, and even then I probably won't have made everything in it.
I think it's the kind of thing that is overwhelming if you try to take it in all at once, like drinking from a fire hose. But the old saying, how does an ant eat a buffalo? One bite at a time. That works here if you just chip away a little bit at a time, and make sure you read through the recipe all the way before you plan to make it, because it might say just casually halfway through, and then let it sit for 3 weeks. You're like, wait a minute. But it's definitely, I highly recommend it. Can't recommend it enough. It's been a great education.
And it's not the only book that this amazing woman has written, is it?
That's the staggering thing, is it's not. She's written a number of books, a few of which I have right here. One is called Nourishing Fats. This is a wonderful book. It's just all about fats, and it's, if you like the footnotes or Sally's little essays, just imagine that you can get a book that is 200 pages of her talking about fat and recipes, with more organ meat recipes and more recipes incorporating fat. Cod liver oil shooter. She has a drink that she calls better than coffee, which has ginger in it, Alison. It's molasses, cream, ginger, and licorice root, so it sounds amazing.
Wow.
She has her cultured milk smoothie. There's just lots of really good ones in there. She has the Nourishing Broth, which she just has a very small section on broth in the book, but this is, again, 300 pages of her talking about broth. And if you just want to go more into broth, or if you honestly are trying to deal with some health issues, this book has lots of chapters on how different health issues can be supported with drinking broth. And this is the book that totally sold me on broth being the #1 sports recovery drink in the world. I mean, I can't even compare protein powders or a lot of the shakes you see on the market in terms of recovery. Broth, as simple as it is, really is king. She also has the Nourishing Traditions book of baby and child care, which is it's not just about food. It's a lot. There's a lot in this book. And she dedicated it to tomorrow's children, which I thought was so sweet. She talks about pregnancy and birth. She talks about children's, childhood illnesses and, foods for babies and toddlers. She even talks about gaps in here. She has a section on recipes. And I think this topic is one, Alison, that you and I, in discussing, are going to have to end up doing a discussion on when we talk about children and babies.
I think so. I remember making things for that book from Gabriel. I remember there being a custard recipe in there and a sweet potato recipe, but also the baby formula in there we made for Gabriel, and that is a huge long story about how it came about and the making of it, and doing that every day in my kitchen for months and months. And then unfortunately there was a bit of a kind of throwback from it, in that Rob and I kind of upset some medical authorities by doing it. And so you're right when you say, I think we need another episode to talk about that wonderful book and the wonderful recipes in it, and that formula as well, which has been very instrumental in my early parenthood, my early motherhood, and Gabriel's life as well. So yeah, another episode.
Yeah. Well, when you told me about your story, just in the little snippet you told me, I just had, chills all over my body, and I could feel like tears in my eyes. And I just thought, oh no, this is something so many moms need to hear discussed. It would be healing for a lot of moms to hear.
Yeah.
And how many?
I think we'll schedule that in.
Yeah. How many kids' cookbooks have you picked up that have recipe for calf's liver and lacto fermented ginger ale?
Yeah, not many.
And their meatloaf, which is just brilliant, where she uses an organ meat mixture and all kinds of delicious fermented, bread and sour cream and things to make a little meatloaf for baby. I mean, brilliant, just brilliant things. So that's another great one. And then she's also written a number of other books. Her book, The Nourishing Diets, I actually don't own, but I am really anxious to own that book. I've checked it out from the library a few times, and I feel like my jaw was just sagging the whole time I read it, because I feel like there's a lot in the media right now, and she talks about a lot of this in the book, where aspects of Indigenous culture and history have just been erased or hidden, not forgotten, but actively suppressed. And she talks about a lot of that in the Nourishing Diets book. That's where I heard a lot of these things in the very beginning about, society or cultures in Australia that were actually tending grain, that we tend to think of as, they're the paleo ancestors, but they were actually tending grain just in a nomadic way, or ancestors here in North America who were cultivating herds of buffalo. I mean, just utterly mind-boggling. And she also has a couple other books. She has the Nourishing Traditions Cookbook for Children, and she's co-authored a bunch of other books all on topics related to this, and you'll probably see her pop up in all kinds of documentaries and things like that. So
yeah, an amazing woman.
She
an
is
amazing
a
book.
lively lady.
It's been a joy to talk about it, and I'm sure it'll be a joy to do our first Zoom live cook up next week. I'm really looking forward to it.
I can't wait.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And if you're listening and you like what you hear, let us know. Contact us on Instagram. And you can go to patreon.com/Ancestral Kitchen Podcast if you want to support the work that we're doing in that way. And if you do, then I look forward to seeing you next Friday on our Zoom.
I can't wait.
And is there anything else you want to add before we finish?
No, that's everything.
Andrea?
I mean, we have another podcast to talk about more, so we'll save it.
Yeah, we certainly will. And we may well come back to this book as well, because there's just so much more to share.
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much,
Thank you
Alison.
very much. We'll speak next time.
You bet. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth and Alison's at Ancestral_Kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration, and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.